On September 21st, 2013, I unboxed The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD Wii U bundle, being the first current generation Nintendo console I bought since the GameCube back around 2003, as in brand new when they were still available to pick up in store. And the Wii U is one of my favorite systems in my collection, spending hundreds of hours on quality games that were actually released, like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, Super Mario 3D World, Pikmin 3, Xenoblade X, and so on, as well as even more time showing off my drawing skills in the Miiverse communities. And finally, the Wii U's homebrew capabilities has the potential of playing over 30 years of Nintendo games on this system alone, making it one of the most well-devised emulation machines I have seen yet. But alas, its shortcomings were Nintendo's greatest downfall, such as the gamepad's troublesome battery life, limited connection range when walking too far from the system, confusing marketing, and overall lack of third-party support, with the Wii U's last year and a half suffering through a major game drought with barely any new titles released, making Breath of the Wild the final nail to the coffin and an appropriate ending to this short-lived console. And I remember being there at E3 2014 during Nintendo's presentation when they revealed the new Zelda title coming out for the Wii U, promising it to be released at the end of 2015, but then later lying and delaying it to 2016 and eventually making it released for both the Switch and the Wii U on 2017. I was angry, but like other fans, I would just wanted a new Zelda game on the Wii U. Not only that, but like most of these games that I mentioned, I actually bought brand new, so when they were all 60 doll hairs. I spent a lot of cash on, the Wii U, only to be disappointed when Nintendo kind of abandoned it just out of nowhere, and I felt really salty, even though it kind of failed and didn't do very well. I don't think I'll ever not be, kind of like angry at Nintendo, but I will say that the Nintendo Switch is definitely an upgrade from the Wii U, and I wanted to go into like some of the points exactly why I think this. So the Switch's best feature happens to be its biggest gimmick, or so I thought when it was originally revealed, and that is that the entire console can be played entirely portable at any time and any place. Growing up with consoles hooked up to the TV, I never thought anything but a handheld would let me play games outside of my house, whereas with the Switch, I flung it into my backpack on the way to the airport, on the train, and even down to Pap's room for random multiplayer sessions.
Take it on the go whenever I gotta go to school, go to work, pull it out of my butt and just play some Mario.
And it wasn't until the Wii U's gamepad when I saw the true potential of having a portable console, even though it was still flawed at that point.
I'm on the toilet, but I can't connect. Whatever will I do?
Most of the times I could barely even play unless it was in a specific position, but Nintendo fixed that for the Switch and I'm able to poop as long as my butthole may please.
I'm still on the toilet, but this time with a working Nintendo Switch. No longer connection errors, but whatever will I do?
And as awesome as it is, the Switch is actually an easy target to, either be stolen, to lose, or get, the screen scratched up, especially in a heavily populated area. So I recommend, being careful where you take your Switch, and also maybe keeping a case on it and making sure that, nobody suspicious takes it away from you. But what adds to the portability of the Switch are actually these two Joy-Cons here, which are the separate controllers that can be removed from the, console itself and either played as, one player like this, or two different people can actually play it separately like this for multiplayer action. At first, I worried that my hands would either be too big for these controllers, but they fit me just fine. And my favorite part is having the freedom to keep them apart, letting me move around as I please. These things are expensive though, at $70 for one pair, with my left analog stick actually suffering from a common drift problem, making characters in the game move on their own, as well as a loose hinge over here, easily slipping off the system without even needing to press the release button. Apparently Nintendo knows of these, problems and fixes them within warranty, but it's still pretty bootleg if you ask me.
I think Chefy T doesn't like this one.
Don't even get me started on this bad boy right in the center. That's a interesting design.
And using them sideways takes some adjustment, and it's kind of recommended to add these like weird straps on the top, but I found it that, these are kind of useless as the back buttons themselves feel kind of loose. So for me, it's actually kind of hard to tell when I'm clicking the button or not, unless you really stab into them. And at that point, I prefer just to play without the straps, or maybe, you know, just using both controllers instead.
Especially don't like it when it doesn't have the strap, of course, because they're a little bootleg with the buttons.
What's cool though is how easy multiple controllers, even if they come from separate switches, can wirelessly connect between multiple systems, making it that much easier to play anywhere with your pals, each with their own rumble feature, which, when implemented subtly, actually feels pretty nice, whereas on certain games it can actually be quite loud, intense, and distracting.
If anything, I kind of like how the motion controls work on, like when you're playing Zordo and stuff. Like the one maze everyone remembers, of course, is the one where you got to get that ball out of the maze thing.
And the improved motion controls are directly built into the Joy-Cons themselves, although still a bit finicky with certain games, as even if the slightest thing interferes with the signal at all, it will kind of, you know, have a hard time detecting that. But it's much better than having to actually hold the entire Wii U gamepad and move it around like that. And when playing with the Switch in handheld mode like this, you have to rely on the kickstand over here, and it's kind of flimsy and bootleg, you know. I've only found it working on a perfectly flat, hard surface, so normally I don't even use the kickstand over here and lay the Switch down, especially if it's, you know, touchscreen implemented games, which may sound a bit weird, but Pep and I, we actually played a single player rhythm game together, you know, sharing half of the screen, playing it with the touch controls, and it actually created for a very unique experience, and it was very fun, you know, especially when the user interface of the Switch over here is actually quite satisfying. I don't know how to explain it, but these random sounds every time you know, kind of like click a button or maybe move, you know, like on a game or whatever, it's very relaxing. Like, I don't know, it just kind of adds to the overall, you know, like simple design and feel of the Switch. And some titles like Pokemon Let's Go even specifically use only one Joy-Con, which, although not perfect, was quite convenient while feasting on food downstairs and playing at the same time. It also helps that holding the home button opens a mini menu for putting the console either back to sleep, changing the brightness and volume levels without actually needing to physically move the Switch itself, which is extremely useful when I'm recording handheld footage off screen or while laying down in my homemade cardboard Switch holder, which, depending on the game and screen distance, can be a bit hard to see sometimes. Not only that, but there are games that actually suffer with performance issues when not in docked mode. Normally, Phil lets his babe borrow the dock, leaving Pep and I no choice but to go handheld mode. So until I can find one for a cheaper price, I'm going to be using my DIY setup of pointing the camera at the Switch, then displaying that onto my TV. And cheaper alternatives aren't really an option either, as there have been many reports of third-party docks actually bricking people's console. There's not really much to it. If you look at the back, all it does is charge the console. It has 3 USBs and then an HDMI port in here. But for some reason, it's very expensive. If I had to choose in the toddler days, I'd either have, you know, once a year, maybe a game, maybe this so I can play on the TV, or another separate controller so we can play with my brothers. That would have been bootleg, and I can't even imagine how, you know, toddlers nowadays have to survive on that. For something so simple, I think that's kind of asking too much, Nintendo. As for the games, there are a lot of indie titles either ported over or developed for the Switch, a quality list of first-party Nintendo exclusives, and unlike the Wii U, actual support from third-party companies as they port over games from multiple generations and systems, which, to be honest, if it wasn't on the Switch, I probably wouldn't have either known about or even tried before. Now, despite being playable anywhere as a portable console, Nintendo does have an online service for $20 a year, which up until the Switch was actually free, but you'd expect that, you know, having to now pay a price to enjoy multiplayer games would actually improve their online service, right? Whereas in reality, it actually isn't that great at all. Now, as of this video, the biggest issue with this is that you can't actually officially back up your save data offline or without this membership. And like, to me, that sounds pretty bootleg. Like, if back in 1995 I get PlayStation 1 games onto a memory card and then transfer them over to another console, why can't I do that with the Switch now in 2018? Especially when Nintendo's own online save data service isn't even compatible with every single game. I mean, people pour hundreds of hours into Splatoon 2, gathering equipment and ranking up their character, so it's just weird that one of the Switch's biggest IPs is being completely ignored like that. Sure, you get some, you know, any NES games that are enhanced to be played online, but that small selection of games isn't really enough. Hopefully the Virtual Console returns, as people want Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and maybe even GameCube or Wii titles playable on the go. There are even like, Sega Genesis, SNK, Atari, and Capcom collections available, which kind of, bundle some of these companies' most popular retro games into one package, as well as even Dreamcast titles making their way onto the Switch sometime soon. So maybe in the future we will get some kind of like Virtual Console from Nintendo themselves, and everybody will be happy. And despite everything I said, all the pros and cons, it seems the Switch is only getting better. Like, people are buying it, the games are coming out, and it seems, next year there's Metroid Prime 4 hopefully being released, Luigi's Mansion, Animal Crossing, and many more. I'm excited to see what else Nintendo has in stock, and I'm so glad that after the Wii U's failure, despite what I think of it, and despite me loving that console, and despite them pooping all over the customers, I am very happy that their Switch is doing well. I'm happy that they're able to port the Wii U titles onto the Switch. I just hope they do that with more. And now the reason like the Switch kind of like won me over, despite me still being salty at Nintendo, was that recently we actually moved houses, and so I don't actually have any of my games in this room right now. It's all in storage and in boxes, so I can't actually get to my games or anything. And so playing on the Switch here was extremely useful. I wish I had this when we were moving. Did you get the Switch on launch day? Did you get one later on? Was there a specific game that made you buy the Switch? Or are you holding out for maybe the rumored Switch Model 2, which apparently is supposed to be like an upgraded version? Nintendo hasn't said anything, but maybe next year they'll reveal it. Either way, I'm just glad my brother got a Switch, because I'm able to experience all these, games that even though they're on the computer, my computer can't actually handle, as well as, exclusive Nintendo first party like titles. Thanks for watching, ladies and turds, and we will see you on another lovely episode. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye. Whoosh.